Hello everyone, and welcome to the AWS Industry Councils, a forum for business leaders to come and share their insights, learnings, and experiences. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Hello again, my name is Robyn Hill, and I have the immense pleasure of working with our retail and CPG customers across Asia Pacific. I'm joined today by Gavin from monday.com, one of our newest retail competency partners, and Brett from Accenture Son. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me for this conversation. So, loyalty between retailers and their customers is often what people talk about when they refer to loyalty in a retail context. But today, we're going to talk through what it means when loyalty is about retailers and their B2B customers or supplier base. So, first of all, Gavin, I'll turn to you. Have you had much experience working with retailers and their supplier base and how you bring that together in terms of having a more collaborative way of working?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Robyn. We're seeing sort of two dynamics to that occurring with the retailers that we work with. One is managing the suppliers, obviously, that they're ranging. There's a number of different communication points there. I mean, something as complex as managing the packaging approval process. So, every product that has to go on range has to go through an approval process. So being able to manage that in a frictionless way is actually real important for the supplier relationship with the retailers. Other things like onboarding new products, like you look at online, you look at in-store, and even marketplaces, because marketplaces are often a different supplier base to your traditional products that are actually online or in-store. And then the other side of it's actually managing the suppliers that may be doing other things for a retailer, such as store rollouts or store updates. So a lot of the trends that we're seeing around that is making sure that you've got what we call a XRM, which is like a CRM of suppliers, readily at hand so you can bring them into the process and the workflow and the tasks and have the ability to communicate with them in real time around what's happening. So I think at the core of any retail business, it's definitely important to have a frictionless way of being able to work with suppliers on both sides of the spectrum.
And Brett, in terms of what does that mean when it comes to thinking strategically about placing a different focus on loyalty with your supplier base versus a customer base? What does that mean for retailers and how should they think about that?
It's a good question, Robyn. I think, as Gavin said, part of the experience of working with suppliers is very different than what you'd be looking at with your customers. So onboarding, for example, of a supplier, not just the products, but them as a business as well, setting up bank accounts, how are they going to get paid, what's the kind of communication cadence that you have with the business, how do you continue to keep them engaged as they go along is a really important part of the, again, journey that we talk about, right? So that journey management is really where you're going to improve that experience with the supplier and therefore start to build a loyalty. It's different. You're not rewarding points necessarily to a supplier. You're not really engaging with them at a one-to-one level. It's an organizational level. So how do you make the people in that organization happy to do business with you? That's really what we try and focus on. How do you make it easy to do business?
Yeah, and I think as Brett said, I even look at some of the retailers, they may have certain suppliers that they're supplying to one particular channel. So that relationship has to actually grow over time as they increase the product mix, as they increase the segments that they're delivering in. So it's not a one-way transaction, it's actually a two-way relationship that they're building.
And I suppose as the supplier base and from a B2B base as well extends that there's more places they can do business.
Correct.
Ultimately making sure that your relationship is enhanced as a retailer with your supplier base and are first in line for new innovation that they bring to the front is critical. Have you seen any success stories or anything that you feel like is a recommendation for the audience today about how they as retailers should approach that, how to earn trust, I suppose, with the supplier base?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it's creating transparency. If I think about it from a new store rollout perspective, it's transparency with your supplier base on both sides of the spectrum. So if something's going to be delayed, as inevitably happens, being able to communicate that as upfront and simple as possible, because there are other implications to that, other tasks and other things that need to happen. So I think having the ability to communicate in real time and transparency is the utmost important. And also having a way that you can share data. So if I think about from a new product perspective, so a lot of the retailers are sitting on the data, looking at the trends and what's happening. If you've got a good relationship with your suppliers, being able to go back and tell them what's happening in terms of product mix or product requests, obviously then allows them to go and look at potentially developing a new product. So I think there's different levels of it, but at the end it's about creating a loyalty relationship with those suppliers.
Yep. And I suppose creating a common narrative in terms of loyalty from enabling your supply base to be as passionate about your customers as well by having a deeper understanding. In terms of digital enablement of that strategy, is there any recommendations you have of what, Brett, potentially for you, what some of the retailers should be thinking about? What should they put in place as fundamentally to underpin a better collaboration with suppliers?
I think the word digital was the right word, to be honest, Robyn. There are a lot of millennials, for example, working in the workforce and suppliers these days, and they don't want to necessarily be sitting in front of a laptop. So ensuring that you have mobile capability is really important. I know that sounds like old news, but it's still something that's kind of hard to do these days in some cases when you've got legacy technology. So you need to think about what's your technology strategy that's going to support a better experience for that supplier. And mobile is a great way to look at it. Of course, we can talk about AI to like the cows come home, how that might supply things, but that's a different approach. But overall, it's what can you do to streamline things? And digital is absolutely the way to do it. I've seen massive organizations still using paper to engage with their suppliers, walking out to a truck and taking things off and so on. How inefficient is that, right? If you could use a platform like monday.com to be able to do some sort of compliance online on your device, tick boxes, for example, something simple, then it makes it a lot easier for the suppliers to engage.
And I think that changing demographic of who's actually in control of the supplier, communication between supplier and retailers, there's definitely a shift to a whole different generation, I suppose, who just, old paperwork and GRing things just doesn't make sense to them. So I really like what you said there about digital enablement and potentially leveraging Monday to solve some of those process challenges. And that brings us to a close of this little chat around retail and suppliers and how to ultimately drive loyalty in your relationship. Thank you for your time today. Take care.